Hey, how you doing? This is Adam Post, publisher of more than 1,000 comic books and marketing expert, covering how Batman's owner, Warner Brothers Discovery, is not going bankrupt or selling the company. Let's get into the story. Before we do, please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications. Give me a thumbs up. I really appreciate you guys. So there's been a rumor going around that Warner Brothers Discovery, the company that owns Batman, DC, the Warner Brothers studio, and more, could potentially be filing for bankruptcy, or that the company might sell itself to Universal or another company. The concept of Warner Brothers Discovery selling itself, honestly, yes, is a little bit less ridiculous than them filing bankruptcy, but they're not doing that. The rumors come from this website, which isn't being covered by any major financial websites. It's not being covered by CNBC. It's not being covered by the Wall Street Journal or Financial Times. And this website, although it has some numbers and it has some charts and different colors, all of this adds up to nothing. Reddit actually did a good discussion of this with a few comments that were meaningless, but a few well-sourced comments and explanations that I definitely want to go over. WDW Pro did a tweet about it. He really knows a lot about Disney, has good sources, and when he gets around to it, he said he's going to cover the story about the potential bankruptcy. But there's just no chance it's going to happen. I commented on his tweet. I don't usually do a lot on Twitter, but as I explained, a company has never gone bankrupt without being able to pay its bills. When they miss debt payments and can't restructure their debts and are unable to raise new cash through the sale of debt or stock or a subsidiary like CNN, which is one of the many things they own, then a few years later, bankruptcy for them or any other company is possible. And just like with Disney not having the money to pay for Hulu, it can't and won't happen. Disney already has taken full ownership of Hulu. They already paid Comcast most of what they're going to have to pay for it. They will pay additional money, but the title, the ownership of Hulu, is already transferred to Disney. And I know people on YouTube, sometimes we get dramatic or we exaggerate, we're just having fun, whatever, but it's important to know basically what's going on and not to lead people along and confuse them. And WDW Pro has always played it straight. As far as the bankruptcy rumors, here's what some of the comments on Reddit are. I will explain some definitions like leveraged buyout, because Warner Brothers Discovery really is a leveraged buyout deal, free cash flow, a couple of other things, just so you know pretty much as I know. 99% of this is really common sense. Firstly, the way this got around and got heavily distributed was on social media, and a lot by the people that love Zack Snyder and his version of the DC universe. As Docs Fox says, anyone who believes this is a fool. This isn't some tier 1 source like Deadline or Variety, and it's got some AI-generated description of investing. Interesting, it's getting thrown around by Snyder accounts, though. He's talking about Zack Snyder. Another person comments, I don't know anything about Macro Access. That's this site that published the story. But why is Warner Bros. Discovery talking about buying Paramount if they're on the path towards bankruptcy? That is a good question. Because, well, of course, they're not on the path towards bankruptcy, but from CNBC, and this is written by Alex Sherman, who's a good journalist, and he writes most of the important Disney stories you see on CNBC. He's broken a lot of important stories, including the one about Peltz nominating himself and the former Disney CFO just yesterday, covered in CNBC. In this article, John Malone, who's a big investor in Warner Bros. Discovery, a self-made multi-billionaire on the board of Warner Bros. Discovery, is explaining what he sees as the future of the industry, which is difficulty for companies that are smallish and don't have scale. And one of the things they're looking at for Warner Bros. Discovery is acquiring other companies that may be in trouble. And they talk about buying Paramount, which at the time of this article had a market value of about $8 billion, carrying $16 billion in debt. Part of how Malone was able to make his fortune and build the entire cable industry was being very sophisticated about deal making. He's also the person that came up with the structure for how Warner Brothers was sold out of AT&T, or really spun off in a special reverse Morris Trust tax-free transaction. And that's what they're talking about. They're talking about buying companies, not selling themselves or filing bankruptcy. This guy explains it pretty clearly. The website Macro Access is nonsense. To clarify, their bond rating is still BBB-. Now, what is this about bond ratings? Bond rating is their debt. If you're filing bankruptcy, it's because you're not paying your debts. It's you personally, a public company, any other kind of company, even a nonprofit. Bankruptcy is for when you can't pay your debts. We've heard literally no stories, zero stories about Warner Brothers Discovery not being able to pay its debts. The same goes for Disney. When people were saying, oh, I don't know if Disney is going to be able to pay for Hulu. It's going to be billions of dollars. They just don't have the cash coming in. For one thing, a public company has a way of raising money all the time by the nature of them being a public company, whether it's stock, whether it's debt that can be converted to stock, which is actually very inflationary. It can hurt the value of the stock and hurt shareholders. In fact, it usually does. But a company that has a substantial public interest in its stock, people buying and selling its stock, is always going to be able to raise money. But when you look at Disney, you look at Warner Bros. Discovery, and their debt is basically just doing okay, and people aren't freaking out who own their debt. Debt is also sold and traded, just like stocks are sold and traded. So if the value of their stock is going down, the company can be in trouble. If the value of their debt is going down, which means you might buy $1 worth of face value debt. So if, let's say, you charge up $10,000 on your credit cards, but it looks like you can't pay those credit cards, then if they were to sell your debt to someone else, they would charge less than the $10,000 face value for it. They would discount it. They would reduce it because the risk of you paying it back would be less. So you can go and look, how is the debt doing for this company? How is the debt doing for that company? And see what people's comments are. That is going to be a canary in a coal mine. That will tell you long in advance if a company is actually in trouble with having the money that it needs to operate. They continue. Warner Brothers Discovery is profitable at this moment, and they're paying down their debts significantly. They're making smart moves in terms of licensing and IP usage. To put it simply, there is zero chance Warner Brothers Discovery goes bankrupt within the next few years at the minimum. This one is even a little bit more sophisticated. Macro Access is nothing but an aggregator. It relies on the Altman Z-score to determine a likelihood of bankruptcy with AI-populated inputs. One would need to vet the inputs that the aggregator pulls, assume the data is correct and forward-looking, and compare those inputs to the firm's actual financial reports via 10Qs and 10Ks. Those are the public reports that the companies file. He's invested in Warner Brothers Discovery and has followed the company for knocking on 2 years. They'll assure you that Warner is not going bankrupt. Very little chance, especially when the company is generating $4 billion of free cash flow per year and now a profitable streaming service. This is what free cash flow is. Free cash flow represents the cash that a company generates after accounting for cash outflows to support operations and maintain its capital assets. It's cash that's available to the company for debt, for investment, for whatever the company feels they need to do with it. It's not the same kind of thing as net income. It's not that far from it, but it's cash generated by the operations of the company that's available to the company to do what they need to do with it. In addition, he states, second, the company is about to flex on its operating leverage by expanding further international in 2024, 2025, and 2026. It has a content deal with Sky that has prevented it from expanding into the main European markets the last several years. Once that deal lapses in 2025, they can roll out Max in the UK, Ireland, Germany, Switzerland, with further expansion into Australia, Japan, South Korea, Canada, and more. And something else you might not know about the company Discovery. Before it merged with Warner Brothers to become Warner Brothers Discovery, Discovery has operations, physical on-the-ground operations in many, many countries. They distribute their library of content through multiple cable services in over 100 countries internationally. They produce local content internationally. They're very well set up to roll out their streaming services and leverage the content they're already paying for to distribute it to more outlets. And they know how to modify it in very low-cost, intelligent ways that make it feel very local, even though a lot of the content will just be repurposed for things they've produced in other places they're already selling the content. They're in a very good position for distribution. That international expansion will likely bring billions in revenue to the direct-to-consumer segment, offsetting the linear weaknesses that has held the stock back in 2022 in 2023. The debt is not an issue. The debt is being systematically paid down. $12 billion plus of debt has been paid down since the merger. An additional $2 to $3 billion will be paid down in the next 3 months. The debt is long-term fixed rate with no meaningful maturities until 2025. A maturity is when the debt comes due and you're not just paying interest anymore. You've got to pay the principal. So what about in 2024? No maturities coming due. So they'll just be paying on the interest through 2024. In the last year, Warner Bros. Discovery's stock is up 23.6%. It's pretty good. Year to date, which means as of January to today, from 2023, it's up 29.87%. The market value of all the stock combined for Warner Bros. Discovery is $29.98 billion, approximately $30 billion. The value of the company, including the debt, is this roughly $30 billion number. But if you were to buy the company, because you're assuming the debt, the value of the entire enterprise is really the debt plus the market value. So basically, it's around $74 billion. Just say $70 billion to keep it easy. The market value of Discovery and Warner Brothers separately before they were merged was more than that number. They have had problems, but they're not going bankrupt. And additionally, they're not going to sell themselves to Universal. And they're not going to sell the Warner Brothers part so they can retain the Discovery part. The Discovery part was a dead-end business, because it was all cable. Everyone knows cable isn't the future of content creation. That distribution is slowly being eliminated. And in some cases, not so slowly. It could be as much as 20% a year. So the rumor of the bankruptcy we now see makes no sense. The rumor of them selling themselves as a full company to Universal also does not make sense. And selling off Warner Brothers so that they have a dying business really doesn't make sense. But let's look at why it doesn't make sense. Warner Brothers Discovery is a leveraged buyout. They're able to pay their debts. So why would they sell their company when the market is not excited about their company? It makes no sense. This is what a leveraged buyout is. A leveraged buyout is a type of transaction in which a company is purchased using a combination of equity and debt. Equity is your money. Debt is money that you borrow. The purchase is usually funded by a combination of the company's existing cash on hand, borrowed funds, and the purchase of new equity by the buyer. Warner Bros. Discovery is a public company, but it was structured as a leveraged buyout. Discovery invested their stock as the equity part, and also AT&T, the way they did the deal, forced their own shareholders to also become equity holders in the company. But if you go, for example, and buy a new house and you put, let's say, 10% down and you have 90% that you owe in debt and the housing market goes down a little bit after you buy the house, are you going to sell the house and take a loss if you don't need to sell the house, or are you going to hold on to it? And then if you see that the market goes crazy and you say, you know something, I want to move out of state, I can get 3 times what I paid for my house, that's the time you'd sell your house, if you even wanted to sell it at all. When you start a leveraged buyout and you take on all that debt, like the Discovery people did, and then you go and you aggressively restructure the company, and you somehow, by miracle and by efficiency, figure out how to have a break-even streaming service when even Disney, Paramount, Peacock, all of their contemporaries are losing billions of dollars operating their streaming services. But here's Warner Brothers Discovery figures out how to do it at a slight profit, almost relatively immediately, of them getting in control of the thing. They're not going to sell this company or the best part of the company to someone else. They're going to continue to operate it, grow the business, pay down the debt, and then get the benefit of it. If you buy a house and you have a 90% mortgage, and then over time you pay down that mortgage, you own the whole house free and clear. That's what the plan is for Warner Brothers Discovery. I'm not telling you a secret insider plan. The plan is you have a leveraged buyout. You get control of the business. You improve the business, pay off the debt over time, and then you own all of it free and clear. That is what they're doing. It's corporate finance 101. It's extremely simple. You can Google examples of leveraged buyouts, and in the space of like 2 or 3 hours, know as much as almost anybody does about leveraged buyouts. It's not complicated. I've been following them for years because I find them fascinating about how they create value through reorganizing and creating efficiencies at companies. Sometimes it's layoffs, sometimes it's not layoffs, but anyone can research this and get familiar with it and kind of understand what's going on. I'm not giving investment advice, but I will say this. No, the company's not filing bankruptcy. No, they're not going to sell the jewels out of the company so that David ZASLAV, who now lives in Beverly Hills, he loves the Hollywood life. You could Google that as well. He's very wealthy already. He's not going to give up his lifestyle to sell his company at a loss to Universal or anyone else. People just don't do that. And as long as he has the support of multi-billionaire John Malone and the rest of the board of directors, like you see with Bob Iger, nothing gets changed all that fast. If you see people looking to do a hostile takeover of Warner Brothers Discovery, the same way we've seen that now with Disney, then you'll know, oh, maybe change is coming. But until they can't pay their debts, or there's a lot of talk about hostile takeover, not on YouTube, but in the financial press, then no, they're going to just continue to operate their leveraged buyout entertainment company, continue to improve results, pay off their debt, and over the course of however long it takes, another 5 years or 10 years, add at least $40 billion worth of value as that debt goes from in the 40 billions to zero. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments below. Always love to see your ideas. Please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications. Give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you again soon with another video. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.